Okay, so my name's Dustin Meyer and I shoot weddings. I've been doing it here in Austin for about almost 13 years now. I do weddings also out of state and also out of the country. For those of you guys that are thinking that destination weddings are a fabulous thing and they're really incredible and all those things, it is very touch and go. And you do get to write it off, just like Doug Bach said earlier. That guy, like you saw, is a financial guru when it comes to running your business. However, when it comes to weddings in general, I want to get you guys out of the mindset of having your head in your gear. I want you to know your gear inside and out to where it becomes instinct. Why? Because weddings are all emotional. Right? They're coming to you to hire you because there's something in your photos that inspire them, that they connect with, where they imagine how they would like their wedding to look, and they match it up with your photos. It's kind of like dating, right? They have this idea of who they are, what it's going to look like at their wedding day, and because of your photos, they're attracted to you. I love that. I'm married, but it's almost like I'm still in the dating world, you know? Just kidding, didn't mean to say that. So today, what I'm gonna show you guys is not a whole lot of technical stuff. Because if you're not ready, if you don't know your equipment inside and out, you're not ready to shoot a wedding. Because the whole point of a wedding is to have your head in the moment. Let me show you that with the first slide here. Those who hesitate are lost. And what do I mean by that? This was a moment that was just right before the limo pulled up and it was raining outside the Texas State Capitol building. I shot this wedding inside the the Senate chambers. The gentleman you see here is a Texas State representative. The reception was at the Bob Bullock Museum and it was pouring rain outside. It was one of those kind of Indian, summer type things where all of a sudden this cold front came in and with it came this huge thunderstorm. And this wasn't planned. I didn't hand him an umbrella and tell him, okay, I want you to go over there and stand behind her. Okay, now I want you to stand in front of him and cuddle up next to him, lift up. None of that happened. My camera was on my camera strap, still on. My assistant was carrying my equipment for me. I was soaked because I can't hold a camera and an umbrella at the same time. If one of you guys wants to invent an umbrella mounted, hot shoe type thing, you'll make a lot of money. Go talk to one of these vendors out here and propose your idea to them, but make sure they write a non-compete first. However, I saw it. I connected with that moment. It really inspired me what they were doing. I liked that romanticism. I liked the emotion. I saw it. It moved me. And I just grabbed my camera. It was on continuous mode. I didn't care if it was getting wet. I shoot with a Nikon D810. It's all gasket sealed and everything, weatherproof for the most part, as long as you don't take it scuba diving without a case around it. And I was able to get the shot. And this is hanging in their house. They loved it because I loved it. It came across in the pictures and it was completely unexpected. When new brides come into my studio, do you think that they like looking at all of the standard bridal portraits that I've done a million times over and over that I could do with my eyes closed? No. They love this. They love anything that's not planned. You can't look backward and forward at the same time. Sorry, I kind of lied. This one is a little technical. A lot of times I like to get people's expressions because that generates emotion. But how do you do that at a wedding if you're stuck in the back and all you get is the back of their heads or maybe their profiles while they're saying their vows or holding hands or something like that? So you can go about it in a different way. Yes, you can hire a second shooter, put them up in the back behind the altar, stuck in the corner in the back to photograph them and their faces while you stand in the back, get the bride while she's walking down the aisle with dad and then get a nice big wide picture of her, with the whole ceiling in the background and all that really great creative stuff. Or you can get a little handy cam or your phone and put it on a tripod mount. They sell little phone mounts and small camera mounts, put that on a tripod and stick it in the back. You've probably seen videographers do that at weddings that you've attended. You can do it too. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You're getting it from all different angles. It's a part of you using your technical expertise as a form of creativity, which once again helps you translate that emotion that's going on in the day into your pictures. I love detail shots. Why? One, I grew up reading comic books, and therefore that kind of influenced me into art. And I can't draw to save my life, but I like seeing geometry and design, sometimes symmetry, sometimes not, but it really kind of speaks to me. In some ways, I really enjoy it if one of my pictures or two of them kind of look like a painting or look like they were designed. So I do take the shoes or the bouquet or the rings. Of course, I always turn to the bride and say, okay, I'm not going to run to the nearest pawn shop. I will be right back with your wedding rings, you know, something like that to let her know what I'm doing. You know, hanging the dress on the window. You probably know really well that dress was not delivered or brought to the bridal suite and they just hung it up on the window. It was probably in a bag, you know, all this stuff. So, but it's okay if you're moving certain things around, whether it's in the bridal room or around the venue, to get a shot that is different. You know, just walking up to the wardrobe rack and getting a quick snapshot of the wedding gown because you're hesitating or you're nervous or any of those other things, or you've got a million other things going on in your head, so you just grab what's available, then how is that any different than what the maid of honor could get with her phone? It's not very different at all. So move stuff around, get your head out of your gear, and think about, you know, what would be really pretty? What would be something different? What could I do, put my spin on it to make it totally different? Something unique, something that I created that I know the bride's gonna like. The other thing I do a lot with detail shots, I'm shooting for magazine covers. Whether it's literal or not, I'm shooting for what I hope would go on the cover of a magazine. Why? What do you think brides are looking at before they get married to get ideas? Magazines, Pinterest, Style Me Pretty, all those websites out there. If you don't have an idea, if you're not familiar with a lot of the pictures that go on those things or whatever, just start brainwashing yourself just like a bride would. Go to other websites, go to Nordstrom and look at their catalog for shoes alone and look at how they shoot just the shoes. Or look at how, you know, they would have just the dress by itself or, you know, anything else. And then practice it. I teach a wedding workshop. We've got one coming up on the 29th. It's 5 hours and it's all shooting. Thank you. We've got a veteran back here. So I show you all my tricks, and they're not really tricks. I just show you the workflow that I go through when it comes to shooting. And what we'll do is we'll quickly go through all the settings that work for me on your camera. And you can actually, you know, put those settings on your camera before we start shooting so that throughout the rest of the day while we're shooting, you don't have to worry about how to set your camera or anything. All you have to worry about is seeing the picture that I see or seeing the picture that you want to see so that you can practice getting the shots that are going to be unique. Don't let fear stop you. This is a racy bridal portrait, but it wasn't my idea. Well, part of it was. She wanted her bridal portraits done at a place that used to exist. It was a bar up off Lake Creek Boulevard called Vivo. Her and her girlfriends would go drink there a lot during happy hour. Very kind of unique, cool, eclectic style bar on the inside. This was towards the end. By this point, she was she was definitely already used to being photographed, and I think she probably had a couple of shots by this point with her girlfriends because it was earlier in the day, and she was good friends with the GM and the barkeep, so they got to have a couple of Patrons, you know, throughout the shoot, which also helps. People call it liquid courage. I call it magical, you know, serum or whatever, magic potion. However, I didn't like this with a studio flash or anything else. I didn't use available light either. I went to Home Depot, bought a $50 Husky brand LED floodlight. with an internal rechargeable lithium-ion battery. Yes, I tested it out before I went to the shoot. I even came over here and bought an orange filter, a little like Tiffin filter that covered the whole lens of the LED so that it warmed up the color a little bit, because LEDs are like a little cool. So, and then I mounted it, I Jimmy rigged it to a light stand, turned it on, didn't have to worry about getting my flash exposure right. All I had to do was look at it and see if it looked the way I wanted it to, and then I could adjust it, move it a little bit more to whatever, raise the height on it or whatever. And then what I did, as far as the way she was laying on the bar, I used the same formula I always use when it comes to posing a bride, as if she was standing up. And we cover that too in the workshop. There's a way to pose women versus how you pose men. And I promise you, if you get it mixed up, you're in for a world of hurt. And she's got these really gorgeous, and literally, she's got very gorgeous eyes. She had amazing eye makeup on, and I wanted to show that. So I had, we did a couple of different takes until I got the look that I wanted. She definitely wasn't afraid to do this shot because, like I said, she'd already had a couple drinks, but at that point, I did a few different angles, but like I said, if you saw in that slide there, there was a lot of diagonal lines going on, and I just wanted to have something that was asymmetrical, and I liked the look of it. So I did a couple of different angles, but that was the one I liked the most. I've known this girl's family since before she was born. When I was 12, we moved into their family's neighborhood. She is a firecracker, but her mom begged me to get at least one nice, elegant picture, because all the other ones she wanted to do were like the ones where it looks like the bride's flipping you off with their ring finger, or other silly stuff. It was really hard to get her to relax. So what I did for this one, also we were at the Texas Women's Federation building, and this room was actually really dark because it was cloudy outside. So even though this is daylight coming in through the windows, it was still really dark. I shot this at ISO 6400, which usually I'm pretty okay with, but for this, it's a lot of white going on, a lot of skin tones, and it's also during daylight. I've got no problem with shooting 6400 when it's dark inside a reception area and I want to do some available light, or if I'm outside. But when it's semi kind of a high key type shot, using ISO 6400, that noise really tends to come through. But I did it anyways. I had a white wall kind of off to the side, so I used that as my bounce, and then got this shot. I didn't even tell her I was going to take the picture. I told her just to hold on a second, let me get my focus, let me get my exposure, and while she thought I was getting my adjustments click, and then she was like, "Did you just take a picture?" I'm like, "Nah." And then, of course, she kind of reverted back to her silly pose or whatnot. So, yeah.
Do you use ISO also when you're using the engagement photo, the pre-pictures with the dress, or do you just use ISO during the wedding?
If it's, do you mean bridal portraits, or do you? Bridal portraits. If I'm outdoors and there's enough light, but the places that I'm moving around a lot to, some are darker, some are lighter, like if I'm in the shade or if I'm out in bright sun, then yes, I will. But if it's something where we're in one location and it tends to be pretty much the same exposure inside no matter what room I'm in, then I'm pretty much going to stick with a fixed ISO, because if I go next to a window that's pretty bright, I don't care about getting the detail of the curtains. I care about her. Do you think she cares about the detail in the curtains? No. She wants to show the dress. The mom wants to show the dress because mom paid for it. So, yeah, I was nervous about getting this shot, but I did it anyways, because what's the worst thing that can happen? It's not good, and you don't have to show it to them. Just show them the other ones that turned out good. Your work will only be valued if you value your work. And what do I mean by that? So many times, like Doug Box had talked about earlier, if you consider yourself to be a business, you've got to treat yourself like a business. You've got to price yourself like a business. Even if family or friends come to you and say, "Hey, I'm getting married," or "Hey, I need a new family portrait because, our son was just born, or blah, 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 all those other things. When they ask you, yeah, can you take it? And you're like, yeah, no problem. And they said, okay, well, you schedule everything. And then you say, okay, it's going to be $125 for the session. And they're like, oh, come on, I got your kid that really great gift card last year to Radio Shack. And you're like, Radio Shack's not open anymore. But you have to, I believe some people are cool with giving discounts when it comes to shooting a wedding. What I do is if I really want to close a deal, I'll throw in a product, maybe a clone album, something I don't have to do any extra work on. I'm just going to have to pay cost on. So they get something at a major discount that I just have to pay at cost, which is not too bad of a deal. I would rather spend an extra $250 to give them that parent album than to discount them 20% off of a $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 wedding, wouldn't you? I would. But the problem is if you're pricing your services, which is the shooting part and the editing part, think of it like this. Someone comes to you with a discount, or asks for a discount, and they're trying to work you down to 20 or even 25%. You don't have to say this, but think in your head, okay, I'm going to care 25% off about shooting your wedding. And you don't want to be in that situation. Because if you're not caring about what you do, then it's just like having a volume studio, the people that would come to your high school and do 400 students' pictures in one day. It'd be like having one of those people come and shoot your wedding. Because they don't care. All they care about is the profit, the turnaround, boom, next customer. And you didn't get into this business to do that. At least, I hope you didn't. Because I also care about cameras and all that other stuff, and I like making people happy. I think that's really the best part about it. I'll be honest with you, this bride drove me nuts. She still does. However, the picture that I took of them doing this, she was totally enamored with her husband. They loved that day and everything, but she nitpicked me to death when it came to when she was looking at the pictures in the album. And I think I actually spent more time on her after the wedding than I've spent with most of my brides in my entire 13 years. It's exhausting, trust me. But you know what? I use this picture for a full page ad I bought in Brides of Austin magazine. This pulls in so many new customers. Why? Because I got over my fear of using this photo because I had such a hard time with her. I took my emotional element away from the relationship with that bride that I had after the wedding because I liked her a lot when I shot the wedding, but the experience I had with her afterwards didn't turn out so great. But I put that aside and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let her ruin what I feel about this picture. So I went ahead and did it. And it was a really great gamble because a lot of people, when they look at that picture in the ad, call me up. Take the moment and make it perfect. Don't wait for it. One of the tricks, and I'll give this one as a freebie, that I teach at the workshop is when you walk into a bridal room, a lot of times they've got those ugly overhead tungsten lights, and then they got the windows open and all this other stuff because the hair and makeup artists want as much light as they have, and I totally understand it. But it's really hard to correct for that later on. So eventually, over time, after wasting so many hours trying to fix an image where you've got these ugly yellow lights overhead and blue light coming in from the window, I remembered something that I learned a long time ago at the Texas school that Doug was talking about earlier. Use one color of light source. Well, I know for a fact that overhead lighting is the worst kind you can use because you get what I call raccoon eyes, the shadows that all of you guys have right now because of the overhead lights. Sorry, I try to make you giggle to wake you guys up in case you're dozing. But these windows in the bridal suite were huge, floor to ceiling, 10-foot high ceilings, and it was a beautiful bright day outside. So what I did real quick is I walked over to the hair and makeup artist and I said, do you guys mind if I turn off the overhead lights real quick? Because I didn't want the hairstylist to burn the lady on the back of the neck with the curling iron or for the makeup artist to accidentally jab somebody in the eye with the mascara brush. And they said, oh yeah, sure. I was like, give me 30 seconds. So then I walk over to the bride, they're about to put the dress on. And especially ladies will know this, if you're gonna wear a strapless dress and it zips up in the back, how do you hold it up? There's a couple of things you can tell your bride to do before they start to put the dress on, or even while they're doing it. Just tell them, okay, another way you can hold the dress up is grab your waist and push up from there. Why? It'll hold the dress up, but it also makes them stand taller. They're not slouching, it slims the waistline, and it looks great. And while they're doing this, you can get a full length of this. You can get in closer and get a shot of just the ring, engagement ring on her finger. She's still doing this. You go around the back, get a picture of her mom while she's zipping up the back of the dress. Or you can tell the bride, you know what, let's take your ring hand or your right hand, because sometimes they wear like grandmother's ring on their right hand because it's blue, and just hold it up right here. And they'll do that too, and they'll do the same thing, but it looks like they're holding their hand over their heart like they just had their breath taken away. I did 2 different shots, or 2 different poses just like that, hands on the waist, and then this one. I was like, can you do me a quick favor? I think there's like something on the side of your dress right there. Can you just look over real quick? And of course, most of the time, if somebody hits you with a question like that, you're not like, what? You kind of just do this real quick and look down and with the eyes. So then I got hair, makeup, eyelashes, all that stuff. And her face was pointed to the window, which is where I told her whatever speck of dirt or fly or a giant tarantula was on her dress, But it works. Try it a couple of times. If you've got a spouse, try it on them. Trust me, it'll work. But I also have full lighting diagrams that I do at the workshop too. In fact, you'll get to see one of those at the end of this. So once again, this was done in Maui. I knew this guy for a long time. He attended a wedding that I had shot in Jamaica. I guess it was something that had to do with, that whole group of friends. They love to travel, so they used the excuse of getting married to travel. Plus, they didn't have to pay for a honeymoon. Everything was just kind of lumped in together. Maybe it was because all of them were major financial advisors for Bank of America, and they knew how to write that kind of stuff off or whatever. I don't know. Anyways, he knew me well enough that all I had to do was tell him, okay, Paul, why don't you take Lena and walk away from the Four Seasons Resort. I found this really cool path that follows the beach, but it's higher up. There's no sand or anything. It's a sidewalk. It's kind of like a jogging path right behind a bunch of these townhomes that face the beach. So I already scoped it out the day before. Why don't we walk over that way and see what we can get? It was right around sunset. And so he was like, yeah, sure. So the whole point of this, as far as fear goes, it's okay to talk to your clients. Now, all I did for this when it comes to posing was I just told them, guys, can you just stand right here real quick? I'm going to go stand over there and just hold each other. And then what I do is when I get over there and I figure out what angle I want to shoot or how high or how low I'm standing, then I just say really loud, okay, guys, because they're standing there thinking, okay, what does he want us to do? I just say, okay, guys, just talk to each other. Paul, tell her a dirty joke. Whatever. Talk about how awesome the reception's going to be. Whatever you got in your pocket, throw it out there. Tell them to not focus on you, to talk to each other, because as soon as they start talking to each other, they will forget about you, which is what you want. So I was able to take the fear out of them and get them actually real life interaction with each other so that we didn't have to worry about them locking up, freezing up, or any of those kind of things. They're completely relaxed, and it comes across in the pictures. And I didn't let my fear get in the way of me kind of giving them a few suggestions. This wasn't, all, big Hollywood production style direction. It was just some ideas that I threw out there real quick. They could have turned around and walked away from me being like, we're done. Dustin's taking up too much of our time, whatever. And then you know what I would have done? I would have gotten real low behind them and took pictures while they were walking away. My camera hardly ever leaves my face. I get a permanent indentation of it on my face at the end of the wedding day. That's a reception photo. That's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and his daughter, and that was at the Bob Bullock Museum. It's like shooting in inner space caverns. It's super dark, especially when they turn the lights off in there to freak you out. So for this one, I don't know specifically. I actually have it on one of my lighting diagrams that I show at the workshop. It's my flashes almost always are set to manual output for, I want to say it's about 1/8 power, and then my camera is usually at ISO 400, 1/125th of a second, and then adjusting my aperture as I go. If I get closer to the flashes, then I close my aperture down more. If I get further away, then I open it up more just a little bit. So, well, I use the Nikon TTLs on light stands with radio transmitters, and that's what I use. And honestly, Energizer Ultimate Lithium, 4 AA's of those inside those flashes will last you all day. I don't even use power packs. I try to be as portable as possible. So I have 2 light stands, 3 flashes, a camera, 3 lenses, and that's pretty much it. So if I can't carry everything by myself, then I don't need to bring all that extra stuff. So yeah. Plus, it's also a lot less obtrusive. Usually I can hide the flashes next to the DJ speakers, and you can't even see where they are. So, but yeah, I think the only setting I can't give you is what aperture I used, but 1/125th of a second, ISO 400, flashes were set to 1/8 power. So,
Do you use any light modifiers on your flashes, or you just have them bare?
No, I just use them bare. It would take me too long to set up the modifiers and stuff. Plus, again, it would take up more space or stuff for me to carry around. For me, I don't know any of you guys that do wedding videography, but a lot of times, you know, obviously they've got to use constant lights. You know, they're not taking just a single image. They're taking, you know, footage. So they've got to have a light that's on most of the time. And so what they end up having to do is they've got these hot lights or LED panels that stay on all the time. And for me, personally, that tends to be a distraction. However, at the same time, it can be an advantage too, because I may just use that and use available light for that. Haha. So, sorry. But a lot of times those LED panels are about this big or so, and for me, it's kind of a distraction, so I don't use lighting modifiers specifically for that reason, because it draws people's attention to them, and I really don't want people to feel like they're under a microscope, especially during something like the first dance, because, I mean, if you look at the emotion on her face, you know, I probably wouldn't have been able to get that if she felt like, you know, she was on a production set. You know, her dad said something to her, I think it was, "I love you," or "You look beautiful," or "I'm so proud of you," some sort of blessing, and all of a sudden her face locked up like that. But if they were, you know, people aren't used to being photographed, so if they see a lot of big equipment around and everything, it makes them uncomfortable. So, but that's why I use what I use. It doesn't mean that's what you should use. In fact, one of the whole reasons you guys even came here today was to come and talk to the reps from all the different, you know, companies here and just ask them about the stuff that they sell, you know, their products and everything else, and find out what works for you. In fact, the strobes that are the TTLs that I have for Nikon cost about the same as what it would cost for a studio strobe. So it's really just a matter of, you know, what you think you would need. Yes?
You said that they turn off the light on this one. It's really dark. And then what happened? You just turn on a flash light?
It's not, well, the atmosphere in the Bob Bullock is dark, but the lights from the DJ were on, plus my flashes still have the ability to shoot an infrared beam that allows my camera to focus. So I'm still able to find them no matter.
Already on?
No, it just goes on right before I take the picture. So if you have like a regular TTL on camera flash and you see it's got that red plasticky thing on the front of it, that's because it emits an infrared beam that only your camera can see, and it's a bunch of hash marks, kind of like a tic-tac-toe pattern, because your camera needs an area of contrast, whether it's color or whether it's, you know, lines or something for it to focus. And so it emits that beam real quick right before you take the shot. Your camera sees it and it knows exactly where to focus automatically. And the other thing too is you can adjust your flash output to influence, you know, what aperture you need to set it to. So if you take a couple shots and they're coming out kind of out of focus, increase your flash output and you can dial down your aperture even more, like f5, f8 even. So that way, even if your camera doesn't nail it when it comes to focus, chances are it'll still be sharp because you've got a tighter aperture. Because I've made that mistake a lot too, whether it's too dark or my flashes aren't, my camera's not focusing quite right, so I'll increase the output of my flashes, and that way I can dial down my aperture, and that always looks better anyways. So,
what is your distance between your flash and your subject?
if I remember the lighting diagram, it was probably about 12 feet or so.
12 feet.
Mm-hmm. And depending on, you had asked about lighting modifiers earlier, I set my flashes to where the zoom heads are as tight as they'll go, which is 200 millimeter. If you're not using a TTL flash, you're using something like a studio strobe, then you would use a snoot for that. So, and that way too, it isolates the subjects. You don't see everybody in the background lit up or anything else like that. It does sort of isolate them too, because just your camera's only exposed for them. It creates that moment of isolation. It's like using a vignette, but you did it with the lighting, not with Lightroom later on. So let me keep going through here because I want to make sure that I get through everything on time. This one was also at the Capitol, but also available light. For some reason, I've been doing a lot of weddings at the Capitol. If you don't know what your passion is, then realize that one reason for your existence is to find it. You got into this business for a reason. You didn't get into this business because you like to spend money. Or maybe you do, that's okay. But I don't have an unlimited wallet. So when I buy stuff and use the excuse that, oh, it's for my business, when I tell my wife, I have to love it. Because if I'm not passionate about it, I'm not going to care. If a bride comes in, I'm not going to care if I'm not passionate about shooting weddings. If I go to the wedding and I get hired anyways and I shoot the wedding, I'm not going to care if I'm not passionate about it. Seeing people be emotional in real life really affects me too. And I like that because it helps get me out of my own head. You know, it helps me forget about the problems that are bothering me. It helps me remember, you know, the happy times in my life, how I felt when I got married. And I'm passionate about that. And if you don't have it, that's okay, go find it. Maybe you're passionate about working at really beautiful venues. Awesome, go do it. This bride here, her bridal portrait, is my most repinned photo on Pinterest. I think it's pushing almost 2,000 repins. But I was an opera major at SMU on scholarship, so I was raised in the music industry. I have a lot of experience being on stage, and you've probably heard about choreography. There's stage lighting, there's striking, there's where props go, all that kind of stuff, and that kind of influenced how I see or how I imagine pictures. So I use a little bit of that element when I take pictures too. Back in the old days, if you were shooting with a Hasselblad, you're shooting medium format, 120 film, you get 12 exposures if you're shooting the square format. One of my good friends, Dan Winters, who does portraiture for celebrities, politicians, you know, Obama, all that kind of stuff, production sets for films and everything. He works out of California, but he comes to Austin quite a bit. He said what he used to do when he shot on a Hasselblad, he said, 10 of those shots are for the client, 2 are for me. This one was for me. I shot this one the way I wanted to. The one for them, I zoomed in closer, got the quote unquote mom and pop shot, you know, where it's nice and tight so mom can recognize who's in the picture, making sure I didn't photograph a totally different bride that day. And so I got this one, guess what? She loved it. Because when I really get into my moments, apparently those are the ones I'm going to post on my website. Those are the ones that attract those brides. She got what she was hoping for, but I really did it for me.
Is that stained concrete?
No, that's a reflection pond. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one of the museums down in Houston. So, in life, we either follow paths or make trails. A lot of times people ask me if I used, you know, some kind of lighting for this to, you create that kind of glow or, some huge reflector. I did. I used a 50-foot high reflector that was about 120 feet wide. It was the side of a wall. It was just some limestone wall down on UT campus, and I just happened to know this was shot in the middle of July at about 7:30 p.m. because I had been on campus so many times taking pictures around there. I knew at that time of the year, just from out of repetition, that the sun is just now beginning to sink behind the UT co-op building. And I didn't want it to hit her from behind. It was just enough brightness to bounce off that giant limestone wall that was directly across from where she was. And it was so huge, I didn't have to worry about my body blocking any of that light. And it made the softest bridal portrait I've ever taken. I didn't have to add any filters to this in Photoshop. It was just there. Okay, I got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to try and do this to make sure I have enough time for the next guy. This is also one of the reasons why I send you guys all the slides, in case we don't get through them. This is an HDR shot that I shot at a reception. And why did I do it? Mainly because I love shooting HDR. I love shooting landscapes. It's kind of an escape for me from shooting weddings and senior portraits all the time. And I never shot a landscape HDR shot at a wedding before, but it was during my vendor meal time, and I did it anyways. I did it for me. This was at the Vineyard of Florence. Once again, I loved it, so I posted it, and the bride is hanging it in her house because that's the place they got married. They're not even in that photo. I mean, how do you get away with that and call it a wedding photo? She calls it a wedding photo, and that's really what matters because she's the one that chose me. People don't know what they want until you give it to them. And this is the big one. This is the grand finale for this slideshow because right after this is the diagram on how I shot it. No bride knows, all she knows is that she wants sparklers. That's great. Make sure you're wearing flame retardant outfit, But however, they were 3 sheets to the wind at this point. So was everybody else holding fire. But I went over to Neil and I said, Neil, do me a favor. And he's like, yeah, man, whatever you want, And so I asked him, I said, do me a favor, halfway down the gauntlet, that's what I call it, I want you to put your arms around her and just give her the most romantic kiss, give her a dip or something and hold it for 3 seconds. Stick your tongue in her mouth, make it as passionate as possible, make it a preview of what's going to happen in the hotel later. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, just don't wrap your leg around her. So they did it. I had just enough time to get the picture and also made sure that I was able to get several shots to make sure that my flashes did what I wanted them to do, and this is how I got it. In the back, I have one flash set to the zoom of 200 millimeter. The second one I've got up really high. Oh yeah, and that flash back there is only set on a light stand about this high. I wanted it to where I couldn't see it at all. I just wanted that backlight without it hitting my lens. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to sign up for on here, I'll email this to you.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. I'd rather you guys listen than worry about taking notes. So I had that behind him, got in nice and tight on the flash, and I also got all that really cool smoke coming off the sparklers. This one up here was up about 12 feet high on my light stand coming down. Same zoom head, 200 millimeter. Didn't change the settings on my flashes because my camera settings were already set to it. And I crouched down behind the limo so that I could get down nice and low, not get burned, not be creating a shadow from the flash that's behind me. And I'm right next to the door that they're going to go into. So I was still able to get everybody in the shot. My lens was a 14 to 24 millimeter. So I got a super wide shot. I could crop it in if I need to. Usually mom and dad are at the end of the gauntlet to wish everybody, we love you, blah, 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 give them a kiss and everything else. And that way I can still get them in the photo. I'm dying from carbon monoxide poisoning because I'm right by the exhaust pipe, but it was worth it. So the mock wedding workshop coming up January 29th at Chateau Bellevue. This is the first time we've ever taken the entire day. We've broken it up into 3 very specific classes. This is all about shooting. Everything I've told you about, technically how I get the shots, is on this day. For those of you that have been to my workshops, if people have questions, they can come and ask me, but anybody who's been there will tell you about it and what they learned about it or what they didn't like about it. The business class, everything about pricing. If you guys want to know what you want to charge someday, I give you my price sheet, I give you my profit margin, I give you a copy of my contracts, I give you everything other than shooting, because you already went to the first part of it, right? That's on February 12th. It's a Friday from 10 to 12, and it's here in this classroom. Last but not least, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to design albums in Lightroom because I hate using secondary software to design them, because let's say I do the layout first, and then once I get the final approval, because I'm not going to waste all my time fixing white balance before she sees the layout, right, and get her approval. I'll wait to do that until afterwards. All I got to do is click on that photo, go back to the develop module, fix the white balance, and then it's done. And I want you guys to save time because I like time. I like my Xbox. Okay, so here's some testimonials. One of them is in here. She's right at the bottom.
The one about you being a fabulous photographer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, yeah, that one. That was true, wasn't it? I mean, you meant it when you said it? Okay, thank you. And
It's if you're starting out and you don't know what to do, and those special moments that you talked about, like the first moment pictures, the cake pictures, all that stuff, it's well worth the time.
thank you.
All day. It's worth it.
Thank you. So once again, my name's Dustin Meyer. If you haven't filled out the form here, you can fill it out whenever. I'll email you a copy of everything along with the audio and all that stuff because I've been recording my talk so you can listen to it. But thank you very much. You guys make sure you listen to everybody else today and go talk to the reps outside, and thanks for coming.